Welcome back to the Morning Brief. And as we start off now, we're looking at the role of legislators in a democracy, particularly that all-important oversight function. They're supposed to engender and ensure accountability and transparency in ministries, departments, and agencies of government. But how well are they doing that? And in fact, who regulates the regulator of ministries, departments, and agencies? Let's have that conversation together this morning. And we have joining us Mr. Chibuzo Okereke. He's a legislative governance expert and policy analyst. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Good morning and welcome, Mr. Okereke.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now, quite a lot has, as we start off now, quite a lot has been said about, this 10th session of the National Assembly, both in their disposition towards the executive. In fact, some have concluded, and not a few now, that perhaps they're just a mere appendage of the executive arm of government. But let's get your view now. In your own assessment, what do you perceive in the character and disposition of the legislators, particularly towards their oversight functions of the executive arm of government?
Well, first, I have to say that there seems to be a dearth of knowledge about legislative practices and procedure, not just in Nigeria, in most part of the world. And if you look at Nigeria, the legislature is the youngest arm of government when you consider the long years of ministry, incursion in our governance process. But looking at the 10th National Assembly, yes, the perception of the legislators as regards their roles and responsibilities, or even how they respond to executive proposals has been low, and these account for a number of reasons. First of all, in the legislature, you do not just deny proposals from the executive for the sake of that. Rather, when proposals are made under the Constitution and the rule book of the National Assembly, you are expected to present it and then have a robust debate. So the question most citizens have is this issue of how well policy proposals interrogated before they are given green light, for passage. But in terms of oversight, a number of issues account for the challenges we have in the oversight governance of the legislature. First is the issue of the philosophy of the oversight and the perception of oversight. If you look at the people from the executive arm, one of the rules of the National Assembly that they hate is that of oversight. The character of the executive arm is that nobody wants to be called to account, nobody wants to be held to account. And then also in terms of resource competence as to the approach to the oversight is also what needs to be addressed within the National Assembly. Oversight is not just meant to probably denigrate or show that, how somebody is not doing his or her job well. No, but to improve quality of governance, to enhance accountability, transparency, and value for money in the dispense of government expenditure, administration of policies, programs, and projects. So the 10th National Assembly, as you may well know, in the Senate, there are over 74 committees. In the House of Rep, you have over 130-something committees that are supposed to be dedicated. Then the principal act of most of the agencies of government had provided on how they should be regularly accountable to the legislature. Unfortunately, this is not happening, and that is why most of us call for the observance of our laws in a very religious and judicious manner, so that we can enhance that compliance mechanism. For instance, when you make appropriations in the Appropriation Act, the agencies intermittently supposed to send in reports and brief the legislature on how those policies are being implemented, because this is central. The legislature, as a deliberative arm of government, is key to carrying citizens along to show the evidence of how public expenditure is being managed. And where an individual or a government parastatal is not getting it right, under Section 88 and 89 of the Constitution, and the Legislative House's Privileges and Powers and Privileges Act, you are to bring that individual to order and then make recommendation on how disciplinary action will be taken. And that also accounts for the weakness we have in the oversight governance system, because one, after the legislature had finished their job, and they had to also send it back to the executive to implement. And in most cases, we have not gotten the leadership political will to deal with the recommendations of the legislature. At other times, the legislature is also considering a lot of political variables in making recommendations, and I think that is what needs to change. Yeah.
Mr. Chibuzo, that would seem to be, the heart of the matter. In the recent past, we've had the legislative arm of government, House of Reps to be precise now, uncovering job racketeering in certain ministries. We've also had, the Senate demanding accountability from the Ministry of Interior on why dogs should be fed with more allowance than prison inmates. And, if we go further down to past assemblies, we've had the National Assembly uncovering, corruption in the administration of service-wide vote. Now, if there is a mechanism, guaranteed in legislative executive engagement such that there must be accountability and recommendations made by the legislators on how officials of these ministries, departments, and agencies who are found culpable should receive punitive action. Why do you find that there is less of those recommendations such that there's a feedback mechanism, for Nigerians to know that indeed we're not just hearing these stories, but also there is punitive action for officials of government in the executive arm of government who are culpable?
Well, I think that it's just the character of the big daddy executive system, presidential system of government that we operate, and how people are appointed into office. And then when you are trying to deal with a matter on merit, other considerations tend to be the focus rather than the subject matter of investigation. Some of the oversight activities you highlighted that the National Assembly had made recommendations in the past, the executive simply, in fact, we had situations where the legislature will be investigating a particular issue, and then the executive will set up another committee. Take, for instance, the abandonment of projects of the NDDC that was investigated by the 9th House of Rep. Immediately they finished and turned in their report, the president constituted an forensic audit in the former president, and then paid billions of naira. Until today, we didn't see anything, about that. And that is the reason citizens and the National Assembly must rise to the occasion. The truth is that legislative assertiveness, legislative activism, and class suicide must be needed if we are going to cross the threshold of what we are seeing now. Yes, people will be affected in the legislature because sometimes those who push and show legislative activism are often abandoned politically, and that threatens other people to try to, throw that particular name. But as an institution of government responsible for ensuring compliance with, our laws, ensuring that executive members of government, behave in line with the Constitution, the Appropriation Act, and other extant laws of the Federation. They need that support to be able to take on the executive. The truth is that if the legislature performs optimally, especially on issue of oversight, governance quality will improve in the country. But the Constitution, the way the Section 88 and 89 had been framed, and the fact that we don't have that discipline to, have respect for arms of government who have been charged with responsibility to oversee other people, we are having this kind of, issue. So the legislature had to stand up, for instance, to ensure that those who have not done well in managing the appropriation provision they gave them previously do not get new allocations. For instance, recommendation like you saw last few days, the House of Rep passed a resolution that the MD of the midstream petroleum should be suspended. The president, how has he received that resolution of the House? What action, has been taken? Because the man was caught on tape demarketing one of the biggest manufacturers and entrepreneurs in the country. So these are the kind of respect you give to the legislature, and then they will begin to have the right footing to take on big issues that agencies are dealing with.
So, when there's a failure in government, in any administration, would it be fair for us to blame the legislature?
Well, the answer will be in two parts. One, the legislature has a role depending on what that issue, is, because at the time of formulation, most policies of government, they get approved by the legislature. The budget, for instance, is one of the biggest policy documents of any government. The oversight of the budget, we don't used to have sufficient time for the legislature to oversight the performance of the budget. It's usually, like a rush hour system. Even the passage process usually have, challenges. And the truth is that it does not augur well for the country if the legislature is blackmailed, oppressed, and then you try to rush them into considering important instrument for development just in the name of we are working together. So these are kind of attitude that should change. The legislature has to also resist, not just at the federal level. Thankfully, there's even an incremental progress. It's a near total collapse at the subnational level. So the legislature itself has a blame on one hand that it could also avert. I'll give you an example, and this is why Nigerians must support the legislature to stand and perform its, duties. There was a committee in the House of Rep that discovered that certain monies meant for a particular item was diverted to another, budget line. They called on the agency to make a refund. It is the executive that will ensure that those refunds are made. There was another incident when certain remittances were not done to the Consolidated Revenue Fund account. The House of Rep or the Senate had, passed a resolution, tendered a report saying the communication has gone to the executive. So you don't work in silo. You don't function as if the legislature does not exist just because of how our governance system has been structured. On the other hand, we run, an constitutional democracy where our president has to be elected through a direct election. The president and the governors and the people working with them have made promises to Nigeria, have taken oath of office and to obey and observe the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So they owe a duty of care to citizens to function according to their oath of office. So both arms, including even the judiciary, will share in the blame of any failure of government policy or, government or any administration. Yeah.
I would like you to speak further on how the legislature can be truly independent, because to my mind, I'm wondering that the FCT minister, for instance, maybe had presented a budget to the National Assembly of over 1 trillion naira. And if you look at perhaps the line items, I didn't see their budget, my assumption, line items suggesting that 21 billion or so will be used to rebuild or refurbish or whatever name it is of the vice president resident. And I can imagine as a legislator, you see that within the budget as a member of the committee. And within this economy that is crunching, literally we're in dire straits, the legislatures went ahead and approved that budget for such what an economist calls emotionally unintelligent expenditure at a time like this. So how do we make the legislatures, what can CSOs, citizens do to really help the legislators to be truly independent? Because it appears they are not really independent.
Well, you see, budget passage in Nigeria is more of a political process. And, the way government is configured, you have members of the ruling party in the legislature who are in the majority. And the rule, both the constitution, who are prescribed voting method, scrutiny, and other processes for legislative activities, has stated how the legislative process should go and how voting or passage of money bills like budget or any other proposal to the legislature. So where you have a political party that is in the majority, it's likely that the proposals they bring will pass. However, on the issue of whether adequate scrutiny is done on these policy proposals is a question of active citizenship and the understanding of the legislature as being a writing legislature in Nigeria. The truth is that many people, even the executive, they enjoy the fact that whatever proposal they send to the National Assembly, they get it the way they send it. And if the National Assembly try to make adjustment or input, it will be called a pardon or insertions, and a lot of blackmail will go out there. So the legislature in Nigeria, in line with Section 80, 81, 82, and 83, is a writing legislature. They have the power of the purse. Whatever the executive is bringing is supposed to be a skeleton or a proposal, an estimate. So they have to now work together to look at what are the constituents saying they're interested in. For instance, in the FCT, what are the constituents, saying? What are their concerns and aspirations? Now, you match it with what is the executive thinking they want to, do for the people. Then this lobby process, and what is required to make that budget to pass is the interaction that happens until that process is. So, but citizens, when they know this is what the FCT minister had proposed, and they begin to do a lot of advocacy, highlighting provisions of that budget, calling on the legislature, Committee on Finance, Committee on Appropriation, and all the leadership of the National Assembly saying, we are concerned about this. We would rather have this. That will help to enhance how legislature can now be able to do better the aspirations of the citizen than just the proposal that the executive wants them to, pass. So that active engagement is very critical.
Well, I wonder how effective that active engagement would be in the light of, the independence that the Constitution confers on the legislators in terms of appropriation, which, has informed the reason for debate over the last few years. If you go back to, the time when the former speaker, when Honorable Yakubu Dogara was Speaker of the House of Representatives, when we had that, issue of budget padding. In relation to that, the last assembly was hugely criticized for, leading the country in the way of fiscal fall because of its approval of the Ways and Means loans under the last administration. But what we're seeing yet again in this administration is its approval, some say even speedy approval of, extra budgetary spending to the tune of about 6.2 trillion naira. And, Jeffrey quoted the monies allocated to the renovation of the VP residence. We could also even talk about the budget allocated to the National Assembly, which many have been criticized for being excessive. Is there any other way besides active engagement, that could compel fiscal responsibility of not just the executive arm of government, but also the legislative arm of government?
So a lot of things will come to play here, right from the leadership recruitment process. If you don't pay attention to the people that, or the individuals, the internal workings of the party and how people come to the National Assembly, after they had arrived there through various means, it becomes challenging to try to model the behavior outside politics, because we are dealing with the interaction of politics, development, citizens' welfare, and what have you. So in this subject of independence of the legislature, in practicality, it becomes a challenge because we are in a presidential system. You should even have where those kind of challenges are more, pronounced. You are seeing legislators commanding loyalty, for their party, especially the majority party that is in the legislature. Whether it's in America, everywhere, the executive is always pushing. Every presidential candidate is pushing to have a majority in the legislature because they know what that means. But what, as experts were saying is, well, receiving expeditious passage of executive proposals, while it may look fine and sound as if you're giving your president support, there is also an issue about what it does to the institution of the legislature. Because all that is expected is for the rules to be followed. And what is the public asking for? Let there be a robust debate. Every proposal must be adequately scrutinized. And the denial of executive proposal is not necessarily, in quote, amounting to independence of the legislature, except when it's done on the merit of that proposal. So for me, it is critical that we understand how politics interact with the legislative processes and procedure, because these lawmakers came from a party and they want to show their party that they are supporting a proposal from their president and what have you. But we have to do better, because this is, apart from serving your party, you're also serving the nation. And people expect, but I'm just telling you, in reality, the lobby, the interaction that goes on for a particular proposal to pass, there's a lot of political consideration and lobbying that go on behind.
Well, we totally understand. We wish that consideration will be developmental consideration, because at the end of the day, the last assembly not only put us in this trouble we're in with their approvals, they even had to amend the CBN Act, increasing the ways and means that brought us into the quagmire from 5 to 15. There's a lot to be said about that. But one more thing as we begin to wind down, the issue of development commissions, the proliferation of this development commission. The president has just signed another one, the Northwest and Southeast. And the model of development commission is the NDDC. And what has become of the NDDC? With the NDDC, the East-West Road is still an embarrassment. The governor of Bayelsa State, the other day, had to call out the minister. The minister had to go there to some sort of intervene. So, and when you look at the NDDC as a model, for instance, it's been bastardized over the years. So if you look at, say, sections 12, that say you must have an MD and 2 executive directors. NDDC has MD, 3 executive directors. There's no provision for interim administrators. We've had that. there is supposed to be a monitoring committee that looks at the books periodically and reports to the president. We've seen massive corruption in the NDDC. We saw NDDC MDs fainting. We saw all that drama when Akpabio was a member of the House. What came out of it when with that investigation of off your mic and all of that? So when you look at the track record of the Model Development Commission, what will be different with all of this new creation?
Well, I have to say, and not trying to sound biased, that actually the Development Commission model is a welcome development for the country. If you look at the Southeast Development Commission that has just been signed, you would discover that since the 1970s, promises were made to the people of the Southeast as to the 3 R's. And none of them, was implemented up to this moment. So this commission is now expected to be dedicated to addressing issue of development within the Southeast. I agree with you that the governance output of the one we have has been problematic. However, that does not mean that we will not have the new ones be able to achieve results. If you look at the 6 geopolitical zones we have, people have been complaining. Why is everything politics, politics, politics? Why 6 geopolitical zones? Why not 6 developmental zones? So that we can focus on our energy on the competitive and comparative advantage of each of these zones. So if we administer the zones properly and efficiently, it will look at the advantage, the resource advantage of that particular zone. We invest in it, and we can say that maybe the Southeast, through this commission, will become the manufacturing and innovation hub of the country. We look at the NDDC, SASA, because there's even a bill on the SASA Development Commission, and they had to step it down for further consultation because the NDDC already covers all the states of the SASA plus 3 other states outside the SASA zone. So the Northwest also having been ravaged by insecurity and other challenges, the commission probably, so this is agitation that you're seeing as a result of the configuration of the country, that resources are not equitably distributed. There's a lot of inequality. So that struggle for regionalism. So this is like an indirect regionalism that is development-centric rather than political-centric. But I agree that the monitoring committee, the governance structure must deviate from the political norm and focus on providing grassroots, rural, and standard development opportunities for the people. And the funds dedicated there are not used to do political settlement, but for development of each of these zones, which are actually regions, in quote.
And the Southeast Development Commission also comes with implication in terms of extra financial appropriation, payment of personnel. And, we could go on and on about the arguments, but it's an ongoing conversation. But I would want to thank you very much for your time on the program. Mr. Chibuzo Okereke is a legislative governance expert and policy analyst. Thank you very much for your time on the program.
Thank you.
And from here, we switch gears to yet another important conversation. What are the effects of excessive screen time on your mental health and your family? Stay with us. We'll be right back with that.